Hello and welcome to my next video about Python 3 and the self-defined functions. These functions have a keyword, def, they have a function name, then arguments, and in Python 3 we can specify a return type. To define a function block, we use in Python the spacing. You can choose one space or more. That's not necessary. To close up this block, you have only to get out from the scheme. You can write here a print statement, not a part of function. If I write this like this, this is a part of that function, but my block is identified with 4 spaces. So when I start the script with this function, the script loads firstly this function and then my self-defined function. Yes, we see not a part of function. That's this function, and my defined function name is called at the bottom of the script. To document our functions, we can use in Python multi-line comments or multi-line strings. For that I create a function and the multi-line comment starts with 3 quotes, then the text, what you want, documentation text, and ends also with 3 quotes. You see that IntelliSense shows me the documentation text. It is necessary that the documentation for each function is directly below the function. If I insert the print statement between the documentation and the function name, it doesn't work. The documentation text will be ignored. So the next point is the scoping. What is that? I create a scoping function, a function called scoping. And in this function I create a value called q. You can use a print statement to print out the value of the q. When I start the script, I see nothing because I don't call the function. Yes, we see number 1, but I can also define here a q with number 2. if I start the script, it will be 1, because local is before global. That means that first, when I have more definition of a variable, the hierarchic order is that first are the local variables, and after that the global. If I delete this and start the script, the number will be 2. And the third step is built-in types. I can use the library Q and start the script. It will be number 2. But when I delete this value and I start the script, I get the name of the script and the location of the library. So keep in mind, first are the local variables, then global, and after that the built-in types. So the next point is the arguments and return values of functions. Argument function. Every function in Python returns a value. For example, delete these functions here. Print hello. And if I call this function and get a return value, I can print out the return value. And the default return value is none. I can also define a own return value. Return value. So if I start the script, we see the return value. I can also define more than one return value. I get the return value and the number 55. I can separate the return values if I use here a comma. Yes, and the value A is the return value and the B is the number 55. The arguments in Python are required arguments. That's arg. So if I call the function, I have to give an argument required. Up, I print out the argument. That's a required argument. Then I can use optional arguments with a default value that's, for example, true. It can be every type what are available in Python. Now this parameter is optional. I can call the function without this parameter, or I can call the function with the parameter. Oh, arg2. Yes, now we see the required argument from the first call, the default value true, and the second call has required and the given optional argument false. After I used this named argument, I have to use the next arguments have also to be optional. I can't write here a required argument because Python resolves the arguments from left to right, and if I have here a required argument, then a optional argument, then also a required argument, Python does not know how to resolve the arguments. So I give here a value number 1 and print it also out. Yes, now I have the required true and the dirt argument. The order from the function call with the arguments are not necessary. I can call the required argument, then I can say the argument 3 is a boolean. So if I start this function, we see the required argument, the default argument true because I didn't set it, and the argument 3 is not a number 1. I changed the type to a boolean, to false. The order of the arguments, if I use a named argument while I call the functions, all other arguments has also be a named argument. I can't use that like this because Python does not know what is that for argument, so I can use also this parameter as a named parameter. Well, when I print it out, it works. The next arguments are the list and dictionary arguments, or key and value arguments. For that I define a new function. Argument2 function, and to define an optional list argument you need the star and the name of the argument. For item in arg, print arg item. When I call this function, I can use it without parameter because this is optional. Yes, I get nothing. Or I can give a list as an argument. Yes, and I get a list. I can use also key value arguments with 2 stars. For item just create a message so I can show you the results. this is also optional. I can call the function without keyword arguments. Now I can give a key and a value as argument. Yes, the key A has the value hello world and the key B has the value 55. And the last point are the annotations. These annotations are for third-part libraries. You can define argument, and with a column you can give the argument information or a documentation information text. So you see that Visual Studio shows me the information about the argument information text when I call the function in another part of the script. You can also define default values. That's also possible. Well, that's it. I hope you like my video. If I forgot something, please write this into the comments, and hopefully I see you in the next video. Bye.